We're about a month away from the official start of the college football season. So, of course, it's time to unveil our SEC Unfiltered preseason power rankings. Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. I'm your host, Mike G. Thank you so much for turning us up and turning us on. We'll turn it out on a Friday afternoon with my good friend Chris Phillips from SEC Unfiltered to talk a little SEC football and some Auburn football. Chris, let's jump right in here on today's show. We're going to talk about your power rankings. We do this segment every single week during the season where we rank every single team in the SEC, and then we'll talk about why you have who ranked where. And then we're going to have, in our second half, we're going to do a fraud alert to see who is the fraudiest of them all. Who's the fraudiest on the wall? Mirror, mirror. Let's jump right in to our conversation today. You guys released power rankings just a little over a week ago, and we haven't had a chance because we were busy at media days to talk about this, but the SEC preseason power rankings brought to you by SEC Unfiltered. At number one, for our listeners on pod, we have the Texas Longhorns, the SEC runner-ups. We got the Georgia Bulldogs at number two, the LSU Tigers at three, the Alabama Crimson Tide at four, Florida at five, Texas A&M at six, South Carolina at seven, Ole Miss at eight. Definitely want to spend some time there. Oklahoma at nine, Tennessee at 10. They lose Nico. You've got Vanderbilt at 11, Auburn at 12, Missouri at 13, Arkansas at 14, Kentucky at 15, and coming in dead last is the Mississippi State Bulldogs at 16. Let's talk about this, but let's start. Let's start at the top here. Texas over Georgia. Talk to me, my friend. Is this about quarterback? Is this Arch Manning greater than Gunnar Stockton? Both teams are stocked with five-star talent. Georgia won the whole damn thing last year, won the SEC last year, but you got the Longhorns ranked above them to start the season.
I do, Mike, and I'm a believer in Texas this year. I'm a believer in Arch Manning. I do think, the quarterback conversation certainly plays a part in it, in regards to Arch Manning versus Gunnar Stockton. And by the way, with these power rankings, and certainly we'll release an updated power rankings going into week one, I'm sure you and I will have a conversation at that point. Not sure how much will change, but I'm sure some teams will flip-flop here and there. These power rankings are a lot different, you'll notice, than my projected order of finish in some spots. So just wanted to point that out. Those two things are different, obviously, but the power rankings, how I view the teams right now, a lot of it is if the two teams played on a neutral site, who I would pick to win. And I just think, Mike, the Texas top to bottom has the best roster in the conference right now, until proven otherwise. I feel like they're kind of they're this year's version of what Ohio State was last year. They went out and spent, despite what Steve Sarkisian wants to tell us, $35, $40 million on the roster. They might have the best defense in all of college football. I mean, offensively, they're loaded at the skill positions. They got some questions on the offensive line, but I expect them to reload there. And, yeah, I'm a believer in what Arch Manning's going to be. Do I think he's going to win the Heisman, Mike? I think that's probably a little bit aggressive. He does have the betting favorites right now, or he is the betting favorite, I should say, to win the Heisman Trophy. We all know with the last name Manning, the expectations and what people are expecting to do are kind of over the moon. But I think he's going to be really solid either way. I don't think he even has to be a Heisman caliber. I think if he's just slightly above average, they've got so much around him. You talk about the run game with Trey Wisner and C.J. Baxter's back from injury, and Ryan Wingo leading the way at the receiver spot, like I mentioned. I just think Texas is loaded. So, listen, you can make an argument for Georgia being one, Mike. I know certainly you and I both, but I know you have a lot of reverence and respect for Georgia and what they've done running the SEC. And, heck, we saw it last year. And, I mean, this doesn't even mean that, Mike, when we get to that game late in the season when Georgia and Texas play, obviously a lot will have happened at that point. Georgia might be my pick because, number one, the game is in Athens, and number two, we kind of got to start asking ourselves, does Texas have a Georgia problem after losing to them twice last year? But right now, I went with the Horns, number one. I just think top to bottom, the best roster in the conference. There we go. Now we got him.
I don't disagree with you. I think it's hard for me not to give Georgia the benefit of the doubt in this conversation, Chris. Kirby Smart has done so much with the talent that he's had, back-to-back national titles, obviously playoff appearances, SEC titles. Georgia is quickly becoming what Alabama was to the SEC. Now with Nick Saban kind of retiring and there being a changing of the guard, so So, at the top, I think Georgia and Texas interchangeable. As you mentioned, this is different than your predicted order of finish. Now, I will say this. I voted Georgia 1, Texas 2 in the conference at Media Days last week. I voted Auburn 6th in the conference on my rankings, based on where I feel like they'll finish versus where everyone else will finish, given what they've lost and what Auburn has gained. But I don't think there's any arguing the top of the conference, right? The cream of the crop. The premier institutions in the SEC right now are Texas and Georgia. Now, beyond them, there's going to be a lot of debate. So I'm gonna pull the rankings back up here. You've got LSU 3, and I'll tell you this: I think Garrett Nussmeier is the best returning QB in the SEC this year. I've got him, number 1 on my QB power rankings over the likes of Lenore Sellers, over Arch Manning. They're going to throw it a ton. I think he was a 4,000-yard passer last year. I'd be surprised if he does not press 5,000 yards this year. They're going to sling it down in Baton Rouge. But my questions primarily are about Brian Kelly. And, they were one of those teams that he's produced a Heisman, Brian Kelly has, but he has not made a playoff. He won the SEC West in year 1. He hadn't made a playoff. I think that in some respects, this is somewhat of a prove-it year for LSU and Brian Kelly, because his whole tenure at Notre Dame was good enough to get there, not good enough to win. And it feels like some of that has carried over to his time in the SEC.
And I think that's fair, Mike. And you and I were talking before we got going about the latest comments, the Death Valley Jr. stuff from Brian Kelly, and it's just we're talking about fraud watch, or we're about to. I mean, I'm not going to say Brian Kelly is a fraud, but he just does some things that feel just really forced. Like he's just trying too hard. Like it started all the way back when he got the job and he did the whole me and my family thing, where he's trying to get the Cajun accent and did a really bad job at it. Slamming the table after you lose to USC, judge me in year 3. What he said a couple months ago about, we expect to be in the national championship game next year or whatever. And now this. So again, what does that really have to do with everything? Well, when you're not winning, that type of stuff becomes a headline. And certainly if they go into week 1 and lose to a really good Clemson team, right? Those Death Valley Jr. comments will be at the top of everybody's mind. But listen, it's interesting, right? Like I've got LSU 3, Alabama 4, and I've got Alabama finishing first in my predicted order of finish. I mean, again, it's a lot different than what my order of finish is. This is just how I see the teams right now. And I mean, right now, you look at LSU, they're stacked, man. Like you said, Garrett Nussmeier, he's also my number 1 returning quarterback in the SEC. What they did in the portal, is very notable, right? Adding some weapons on the offensive side. Obviously, you've got Nuss back. You look at defense, they revamped there. It's year 2 under Blake Baker. They should take a step forward. There's question marks, no doubt. They got question marks on the offensive line. Are they going to be able to run the football this year with a bunch of new faces? The back end of their defense is all brand new. It's a brand, a lot of talented guys, but it's a brand new secondary. They had problems last year stopping running quarterbacks, but the semblance of talent they have, Mike, again, it should be college football playoff or bust in Baton Rouge. And I gave them the nod over Alabama right now because of the fact they have a Garrett Nussmeier under center. They have a proven guy that if he does take the next step, and Brian Kelly, heck, at SEC Media Days, Mike, you heard him say, we expect a year 2 jump from him like Jaden Daniels had. You talk about putting expectations on a guy. That's Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. So that's pretty big-time expectations. But if he can make a similar jump, not that big, but a similar jump, cut down on the turnovers, if LSU can support him in the running game, they've got talent all over the field. But I do agree with you, Mike. There's a lot to prove for LSU. Certainly Brian Kelly has a lot to prove this season because it feels like he always gets close but can never quite get to where you want to go, to the mountaintop, if you will, and that just won't fly down there in the Red Stick. So LSU is a really interesting team. I think they're a team that the floor for them, Mike, they could go 9-3 or 8-4 and miss the playoff. But I think the ceiling, if it all comes together, they could be a team, I think, that goes 11-1, makes it to the SEC title. And, well, could they win the national championship? Maybe. I mean, you never know in the playoff format, but certainly I think they could be a team that's in Atlanta end of season. So, yeah, they're a fascinating team, but certainly when you have a guy like Garrett Nussmeier returning, it's a big boost.
In my mind, Chris, 9 wins is not going to get you in this playoff.
No,
I
think we learned that last year, Mike. I don't care how tough you're. I mean, the committee showed us last year. This is a whole other conversation, but I mean, the committee showed us last year. Strength of schedule means nothing. So I don't care what your schedule is. I don't think you can look at a season and say, hey, if we go 9-3 with this schedule, we're good. I don't think that you have to get to 10 wins, I think, to have a shot.
I agree. Well, before we get to the break here, let's talk a little Auburn. Auburn down at number 12. They were voted 11th at SEC Media Days. And I think that's a good spot for Auburn, right in this range. Notably ranked in front of you, Auburn, are teams that quite frankly, they lost to last year. Now, they beat A&M, but you lost to Vanderbilt. You lost to Oklahoma inexplicably. Like when they were, every wide receiver was hurt. They changed quarterbacks during that game. Now Auburn has Oklahoma's starting quarterback. But I think that this is the spot that Auburn has earned. There seemed at Media Days last week, there was a universal recognition of what the talent level right now is at Auburn. I did not talk to anyone last week that did not acknowledge that Auburn has an extremely talented football team and that they should be better. Will they be better is a question and an indictment on Hugh Freeze. It is people questioning whether Hugh is the one to get these guys over the hump. He has delivered wins against Nick Saban during his career, but losses to Vanderbilt in the same season. So I like Auburn at 12. I think that they have a lot to prove. This is a prove-it year for Hugh Freeze as well, too. But talk to me before the break here about Auburn and why you have them 12.
Well, Mike, to reinforce what you just said, and I mentioned it to you at Media Days, and we said it on our own airwaves. I mean, certainly Auburn's got more talent than being at that 12 spot. I mean, they're much more talented than a couple of teams I got ahead of them. I mean, heck, even looking at the power rankings graphic, I'm like, I could have put him ahead of Vandy. But then I go back and I'm like, well, I mean, on a neutral field, do I take Diego Pavia or do I take Hugh Freeze? At this point, like, I don't know, So, listen, Auburn's fascinating. They're maybe the biggest boomer bust team in the SEC this season. I mean, I told you again in Atlanta that it's really easy to fall in love with that roster when you look at them and the additions they made. And I think it is a team this season that the expectations should be, and because Auburn should win 8 or 9 games this season. Like, I don't think that's a crazy expectation or unrealistic, especially you have a schedule, Mike, that it's not easy. Let's not throw that word in there, but it's workable. It's somewhat favorable, right? I think the schedule sets up really well for you to make a run. I mean, I don't know if you recall me saying this last year, Mike. You remember when I said that, I was just saying it wasn't necessarily my prediction, but I said, what if Auburn's 5-0 going into the Georgia game? I look at their schedule and I kind of say that again. Like, what if I think Auburn very well could be 5-0 or 4-0 or whatever it is going into the Georgia game, set up a big-time matchup there at Jordan here. So there is a lot of opportunity. We'll see what Jackson Arnold is. I believe in the potential and what he can be. I think he was just in a really miserable situation last year. You mentioned all the things going against Oklahoma, the system he was in, everything. But you add Eric Singleton at wide receiver. Cam Coleman obviously is a dude you can make a debate that he's the best wide receiver in the conference, better than like a Ryan Williams. I do think Auburn's going to figure it out at running back. I know you and I talked. There's no Jarquez Hunter, but whether it's running back by committee or somebody emerges as an RB1, I think Auburn will be fine at the running back position and being able to run the football. And then defensively, you just trust that DJ Durkin is going to have yet again one of the better defensive units in the conference. And I think the thing that's holding most people back is, what does Hugh Freeze do with this semblance of players? Is he going to be able to get the most out of this group of talent? Because even with Peyton Thorne under center, who I know was not good. Trust me, I get it. He was my 16th ranked quarterback, I believe, going into last season. But you still watched Auburn and you were like, they should be better, especially when it came to losing games in maddening ways and, feeling like you weren't putting the talent in the best possible position to be successful. So, I mean, listen, again, Mike, this is an Auburn team. They should finish well above that number 12 ranking in my power rankings. They should finish well above 11th where they've been picked by the media. But I think there's one very obvious thing that's holding everyone back. At some point, you just want proof of concept. Like, you just want to see it happen before you jump all in and you believe. And that's kind of where I'm at with Auburn. So, again, a lot of talent, very easy to fall in love with the roster. But, it starts week 1 at Baylor. Go out there and set the right tone for the season. And, I think if you do that and you build some momentum, again, the schedule sets up really well for, like you and I talked about. Come November 1st, Auburn should be in the college football playoff conversation. I'm not telling you they should make it, but if we're not having conversations about, hey, there's a path, hey, there's, they're right in the thick of it. If they're not sitting around like when the college football playoff rankings are coming out beginning in November, if they're not around like 15 or 16 or 14 or 15, Mike, if they're nowhere near the conversation, something has gone awry because with that talent,
really wrong. Yeah,
with that roster and the way the schedule sets up, they should be in that combo.
100% agree. They should be in the conversation always in my book. But look, it's going to be an ongoing thing going into October. We talked about Auburn's first 6-game stretch. Can they get out of that 4-2? I think that's what has them in the conversation potentially headed into November, going into a stretch where they will see Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Mercer. So I think Auburn should clean that
up really well.
Yeah,
but really well.
We'll see. Look, we talked about where everybody is ranked. Great power rankings, my friend. But now it's time to identify the frauds, to talk about who has a chance to be the fraudiest of them all on the list. We'll get to our frauds list right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of the Auburn Express is brought to you by our friends at the Vibe Vault. You can find them at 3462 Crosswinds Road, Suite E in Phoenix City, Alabama. That's right across the street from the Chattahoochee Valley Community College, next to Renfro's Supermarket and Marco's Pizza. The Vibe Vault. If you're in the Columbus, Phoenix City area and you're looking to get fresh for the weekend, get fresh for the weekend with the Vibe Vault. Not just barbers, lifestyle consultants. This episode of The War Report is brought to you by our friends at The Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORTER. Get 15% off your Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, whatever ails you in life, The Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. Longtime sponsors of the show. Visit them for all your herbal medicinal needs. Also want to thank our friends at Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com. /WR. Use code Get Your Weight Up 15% off your weights and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. Summer's here. You want to be outside with your family around the grill. Work out, grill out, chill out with Golden's Cast Iron. Also want to thank our friends at setsforsociety.ai. Would you like to get to know yourself just a little bit better? Learn how to function within a team. Learn how your team functions with you, how to communicate with your team, how to best learn from your team. Setsforsociety.ai has custom personality assessments that help you discover more about yourself and be a better teammate and coworker. Visit setsforsociety.ai today to get your personality assessment started today. Get to know yourself. Sets for Society. Chris, let's jump back into our conversation. It is time for us to identify the frauds. This is our frauds list. First up on the frauds list is a team that, we talk before every segment. So I want to make sure everyone understands how serious we are about these frauds and their potential to fraud out this season. Coming in at number 1 on the frauds list is South Carolina. Now, you have some strong feelings about what they've lost defensively. Talk to me about South Carolina and why they are potentially frauds.
Well, and I think too, Mike, it's important to note that when we're talking about, teams with no expectations, you're not going to put a fraud alert on because nobody's expecting to be much of anything. I think South Carolina, I think there isn't a team in the conference that may underachieve more comparatively to their preseason expectations in the Gamecocks. I mean, Mike picked to finish 5th in the conference by the media. Lenora Sellers, first team All SEC, which granted that I don't have as much issue with because he's just a freakish talent. And I have he might end up being the best quarterback in the conference and first rounder and all the accolades, what have you. But yeah, I just think they lost a lot, man. They lost a lot, especially on the defensive side. You lose 3 of your top 4 defensive linemen, including Kyle Kennard, who was the defensive player of the year. Dylan Stewart does return, but who's going to be the Robin to his Batman, if you will, on the other end of the edge? You lose both starting linebackers, including Debo Williams, who was a very underrated leader on that defense. And in the back end, you lose Nicky Manwari, who was one of the best safeties in the conference. Now, again, they returned some talent. Like I mentioned, Dylan Stewart, Jelon Kilgore is a guy I really like, DQ Smith as well. But you lost a significant amount on the defensive side. And offensively, I think the departure nobody's really mentioning, Mike, is that of Rocket Sanders, who really made that offense go. I mean, he was the straw that stirred the drink, I thought. Lenora Sellers got all the pub and all the credit. And certainly, again, he did a lot. But, when they didn't have Rocket Sanders in that bowl game, and I know you can't take bowl games as like the end-all, be-all, but they looked a lot different. Like when they got down there in the red zone and they weren't able to punch it in, they had to ask Lenora Sellers to make some throws and do some things, and it didn't work out. And obviously, Illinois won that football game. So, who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver? It seems like that's been a question the last 3 years. I think they've got some capable options there, but I don't know that Nick Harbor's really ever going to be that guy. They're probably going to be depending on some youngsters to step up. Heck, they lost their top target on offense, Joshua Simon, the tight end, who, again, people don't realize that South Carolina's leading pass catcher was a tight end. It's Michael Smith, the next kind of guy in line, ready to emerge and be that dude, be that top target. And, line of scrimmage, again, is always a question for South Carolina. The offensive line was not great last year. They were bailed out so much by the abilities of a Lenora Sellers. So, again, I'm not saying South Carolina's a fraud from the standpoint they're going to go from people talking about college football playoff hopeful to missing a bowl game, but I think there's a lot of people. They're catching a lot of hype. Again, obviously picked to finish 5th. I think at minimum they are on fraud watch. I don't see the Gamecocks quite meeting some of those lofty preseason expectations.
All right. The Gamecocks on fraud watch. Chris's fraud watch. Let's jump to one of my frauds here. I think Ole Miss has to be on fraud watch.
Shocker. I can't believe this, Mike. I'm stunned that you would think Ole Miss is a fraud. Stunned.
How could they not be on fraud watch? Is there a coach that has consistently underperformed while somehow meeting expectations more than Lake? Last year, they had one of the easiest paths to the playoffs I've ever seen, and they lost to Kentucky. They beat Georgia and lost to Kentucky. To me, last year was proof that where there is a will, there is a way for Lane Kiffin to go lower than what we think their floor is. I thought they should have started the season 6-0 based on that schedule. They didn't do that. They just lost one too many games, 10 wins, and you're in. If you couldn't do it last year with Jackson Dart, I don't know if they got better at quarterback. Chris, I don't know if they got better at quarterback. So, if you couldn't do it last year with Jackson Dart, how am I to believe that you are going to do better this year in what, quite honestly, is going to be a very competitive middle part of the SEC in my book? So, Ole Miss on the fraud watch. Let's move down our frauds list here. Now, you mentioned that you think Florida should be on fraud alert. Talk to me about Billy Napier's squad. They've got one of the best young returning quarterbacks in the SEC, and DJ Lagway. I think that pick up there in recruiting paid dividends for them last year. But we saw probably the hardest schedule we've ever seen in college football history. Talk about why you have Florida on your potential fraud list.
Yeah, and potential, because I'll say this, Mike, and I think more so, I was surprised, actually, the amount of people at SEC Media Days that were doubting Florida, were skeptical of them. There's a lot of DJ Lagway's overrated talk. I picked Florida to finish 5th in my predicted order to finish. Like the way people are talking about South Carolina, that's how I feel about Florida. But certainly, I mean, I think they're a team you got to put your radar up, right? Spidey senses are tingling when it comes to what Florida may or may not be this year. So I think they're certainly on fraud watch. Am I saying they are going to be frauds? Well, again, I don't necessarily believe that. I think they can win 8 or 9 games this year and be in that playoff convo. But, maybe DJ Lagway continues to turn the football over, right? He wasn't he had those 9 interceptions in his limited playing time. Maybe Billy Napier reverts back to some of the stuff we saw the first couple of years, right? Like I thought I do think he made a good point at media days in regards to mentioning that the schedule looks really daunting, but similar to last year. I mean, Mike, some teams are going to be better than you expect. Some teams are not going to be as good as you expect, right? It was funny how we went down that stretch last year and we're like, man, like that last couple of games isn't as daunting as we thought it would be with LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, a bunch of teams that underachieved. So we'll see if it plays out that way again this year. Schedule's obviously brutal. I think that is one of the reasons you throw them on fraud watch. But, if DJ Lagway hasn't progressed, if he's not 100% healthy, I think that's another thing. I think certainly we could be talking about them towards end of season as, man, the Gators were a bit fraudulent in regards to what their preseason expectations were. But I feel like, again, a lot of people maybe are ahead of the curve and beat me to this and beat you to it as well. Because, again, I heard a lot of conversations at media days. I was kind of surprised at how skeptical people were of the Gators.
Yeah. Look, a lot of skepticism. I think rightfully so. They had a very tough schedule. A lot of people had Napier tagged as a dead man walking mid-season. Not only did he survive it, their AD came out and gave a public vote of confidence for Napier in the direction of the program. I thought he navigated last year's pressure as well as I've seen any coach. 11 Power 5 opponents on their schedule last year. Crazy to survive that. Next up on our fraud list, potentially, you got Texas A&M here on your list as a potential fraud. A lot of Aggies were happy with Mike Elko's first year in College Station, and they showed a lot of potential last year. But talk to me about Texas A&M landing up on the potential fraud alert.
I mean, this one's pretty self-explanatory, Mike. I mean, every single year there's somebody out there hyping up Texas A&M to go win 10-plus games, go to the college football playoff. And listen, I don't know if there's any Aggies tuned in, but I said that on social media, and I think a lot of them think I have some bone to pick with them or some – and I don't. Like, I love the Aggies. I hope for their fan base's sake they break through that glass ceiling one day, but – yeah, I mean, you have to put A&M on fraud watch, Mike, because they do it every year. I don't know. I don't know that there's a program in the SEC that has a more self-inflated image of what they are versus what actual reality is than Texas A&M. And again, I think Mike Elko, to your point, did have a successful year one. I thought 8-4 would be a good year, taking over a really broken culture. And it was just the way it happened, right? The fact they started 7-1, the fact that they lost those next 4 games, including the bowl game to USC. I mean, it leaves a really sour, or 4 of the last 5, I should say, leaves a really sour taste in your mouth. They've got talent all over the field. If you slap a different logo on them, Mike, I might be buying into the college football playoff conversation in the chatter because, again, they might have the best offensive line in not just the conference, but the entire country. They've got capable playmakers. They might have the best running back room in the conference. If Marcel Reed can take a step forward, and obviously a Mike Elko-led defense, they've got tons of talent on that side of the ball, led by Torian York at the linebacker spot. But it's just, can they break through that ceiling I mentioned? I'm just not convinced. Like, again, it's just, I have to see it. I dove into the A&M hype head first a few years ago, and I promised myself I would never do it again. And you got to put the Aggies on fraud watch, man, because that's just that's at some point, like, you are who you are as a program, Mike. And I think over the last 20 or 25 years, they are literally averaging 8 wins per year. So, fraud watch from the standpoint of when we're talking college football playoff contenders, A&M might be a little fraudulent when we talk about them in that conversation.
Yeah. Like, I think it's important to put the context around fraud versus the expectations on your program this year, right? Like, let's move on here. This next one is one I'm owning, but I think LSU You got them 3 in your SEC power rankings. I think they got to be on Fraud Watch.
It's not bad. It's not a bad pick.
As I mentioned, Garrett Nussmeier, the best returning quarterback in the SEC. But if you're Brian Kelly, you've won the SEC West, you produced a Heisman in Jaden Daniels, and somehow they haven't made a playoff yet. There was tons of talent. There's a lot of resources. He had everything that he didn't have at Notre Dame, at LSU. And this is a prove-it year. I think they got to be on Fraud Watch here if you're Brian Kelly. He's got to get it done, man. Disappointing opening day losses, just inexplicably he's losing games that LSU should not be losing. I'll give them credit for not losing to Ole Miss last year. However, that's all I'm giving them credit for. What do you think about LSU being on Fraud Alert?
I think it's a good pick. Funny enough, I didn't know where you were going to go earlier in the show when you mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. When you said Garrett Nussmeier is and I was like, I was waiting for it because, I talked to some. They think he's the most overrated quarterback in the conference. There's some out there that think that. So which I understand though, because if we have him number 1 and we get more of what we got last year from Nussmeier, he was the most overrated quarterback. He was. Right? I've equated him so many times, Mike. He's the pitcher that throws 100 and has got nasty stuff. And when he's on, he's really on. But when he's not, it's ugly. It can get ugly, right? So has Garrett Nussmeier risen his floor? I think that's the big question. Not the ceiling. Ceiling's there. Has he risen the floor? Is he more consistent? Does he cut the turnovers, let's just say, in half? If he does, he's got the ability to end up in New York in the Heisman Trophy ceremony. But certainly, I think it's a good pick. I think LSU is one of those, again, the radar goes up when it comes to the Fraud Watch and Fraud Alert just because of the shortcomings by Brian Kelly since he's been there, not being able to win the big game, not being able to meet the expectations that are so very clearly set in Baton Rouge. You mentioned, Mike, they got another tough opener at Clemson, which Brian Kelly is referred to, like we talked about earlier, as Death Valley Jr., right? So, that's another – and I don't think their playoff hopes are crushed, no matter who loses that game, by the way, a week 1 game. They're certainly not out of the chase for the playoff if they lose that one, but it'll just be another season opener, especially depending how it goes. Then you've got a really tough SEC slate. You got to go to Alabama still. A lot of potential pitfalls. You got to go to Ole Miss. A lot of potential pitfalls on that schedule. So, yeah, I think that's I think under Brian Kelly's watch, until, Mike, they show us any semblance of like a consistent product that we can depend on that's going to go win the games they're supposed to and maybe, every now and then rise to the occasion and win a big game. Yeah, certainly, again, for the expectations they have, and I think everybody agrees they should be in that top tier of that top 4 with Bama, Georgia, Texas, and them. I think you definitely got to put them on Fraud Watch because if there's one team, Mike, that's not going to finish in that top 4 and is a fraud, it's probably more than likely LSU.
Yeah, I agree. Look, they've got to get it done, man. Brian
it's put
Kelly,
up or shut up this year. It's really, truly put up or shut up.
If Coach O can get a championship, man, Brian Kelly should be able to do it. That's just me. Yeah. I don't think that he's not as good a coach as Coach O. So, get the guys in there. He's already produced a Heisman. Obviously, Coach O produced a Heisman in Joe Burrow. I don't think that Jaden Daniels is a better quarterback than Joe Burrow, but certainly both those guys are very, very good. Mm-hmm. So, in times where you find your guy at quarterback, when you find him at quarterback, it is incumbent on you to get it done. And I don't know that they have shown that they will be able to get it done. Moving down our frauds list here to close the show, I've got the Vanderbilt Commodores on Fraud Watch. No, I'm sorry. I got Alabama on Fraud Watch. I have Alabama on Fraud Watch. Vandy's always on Fraud Watch. But Bama is on Fraud Watch this year. Come on, man. Kalen DeBoer, while I know you got them probably finishing first in the conference, and by composite star, they are very talented. They seem to be doing well in recruiting. But he inherited the most talented team any coach has ever inherited in the history of college football, and he missed the playoffs with that team. And, again, I'm not letting him off the hook. The same energy I have for Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. You cannot do what they did last year in the great wins that they had, and then lose to Vanderbilt and miss the playoff. You
lose
lost
to Oklahoma.
To Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
The loss to Oklahoma. Inexplicable losses.
Mhm.
I think he learned in his first media days. I asked him about the differences between what they did in the Pac and what they are going to do in the SEC. And he was like, well, you know, he kind of arrogant. Well, whatever our system works. And look, man, it's the SEC. This is a different beast.
I think he told you football's football. Like if I recall that answer.
Yeah. Look, it's 9-3 football apparently in the SEC, and I think that it's going to be 8-4 football potentially this year. If he for some reason doesn't have his guy at quarterback. These things go through cycles, man. Like it is very, very hard to replace. Georgia fans were all in a tizzy a couple of years ago when they're coming off that first national title. I said, look, I think they got a lot to replace defensively. I was wrong about their defense, by the way. Somehow they reloaded in a crazy fashion. That in the second championship, that defense was nuts. But also, they played some very good offensive football teams. And if Stetson Bennett does not raise his game in year 2, they don't go back to back. He absolutely carried them at times that year. And the prior year's version of him wasn't going to get it done. I don't know. Georgia fans were so mad at that statement that, like, look, he's got to raise his game. Credit to him. He did. He made New York for the Heisman. That's how much he raised his game. It is difficult to find quarterbacks year after year after year. Alabama won one of the greatest runs we've ever seen with Jalen Hurts, Tua, Mac Jones, Bryce Young. Come on, man. This is crazy to me that that's where we're at. So I don't know. I think there's a better chance they come up short than they move forward, but not everybody feels that way. I think a lot of people are still living on the ghost of Nick Saban, the nostalgia of what Alabama has been for the last 20 years. Chris, I think that's over. Steve Sarkisian is here. Kirby Smart has been announced himself, and I don't think those guys are moving backwards. So you are just right there in the middle of the pack with the rest of us now, Alabama. After 2, it's wide open, man. I'm telling you, it's wide open.
Listen, I think everything you said is fair. I mean, here's the thing. What we don't know is what we don't know, and we don't know a damn thing about Ty Simpson. I mean, we really don't. Like, it's whether you think he's going to be the dude or you think he's going to flop miserably. Like, I think you can make a case for both because, again, we just don't know. I do trust that with Ryan Grubb, I think I think they upgraded at quarterback from a system fit, and I think what they want to do. I don't know that Jalen Milroe was a great fit, and obviously we saw that went last year. But I mean, listen, Mike, you're not wrong. I mean, is Alabama going to beat the teams they're supposed to beat? There's not that just level of confidence, and there's not that fear, the fear of God that Bama used to strike in you. That, like, my God, they're just going. I mean, we feel like we've lost before we even take the field. I mean, obviously, like if that were the case, Vandy doesn't beat them. A bad Oklahoma team doesn't run them out of the building. So I think there's a lot of fair questions with Alabama. I love the roster, but I understand the putting them on fraud alert because it could go south. I mean, heck, it's a game we're not even really talking about. Nobody's giving credit to is that season opener at Florida State. I mean, God, who knows? I mean, we don't know what Florida State's going to be, and a team's never more motivated than they are in week 1. And obviously FSU is going to be better. Tommy Castellanos obviously feels pretty confident about their chances, but, listen, like I said, I get the fraud watch alert. Could they slip to 9-3? Yeah, I think. I mean, they got to go to Georgia. They bring LSU to town. They got to play Diego Pavia again. They got Oklahoma again, obviously. So yeah, I think I get where you're coming from. I think it could happen. Obviously, I am high on Bama this year, but no, I mean, listen, it's, maybe Kalen DeBoer is just not cut out for this life. We're going to find out more this year. That's for sure.
Yes. To round out our potential frauds list, our fraud alert list, I've got the Auburn Tigers at 12. To be fair, I don't know how you don't have Auburn on this list potentially. Now, as I mentioned, there is a universal recognition that the talent level on the Plains is as high as it's ever been, if not the highest it's ever been. Hugh Freeze has done a great job in recruiting. They've done a great job in the portal. They have spent money. They've done what they needed to do to get the talent to the Plains. I would venture to say the only thing they've really been missing has been a quarterback that is next level. They think they have that guy in Jackson Arnold. There's a belief that Oklahoma was a bad fit for him, Chris. And this in his second life should be a good reset for him. They've got Deuce Knight, who is the young heir apparent that looks every bit of the stars that he was rated. But this is a prove-it year for Hugh Freeze as well, too. I can, with relative to the expectations, which are 8 or more wins, you have to have them on fraud alert. I didn't think there was any way that last year, even with the guys they had with Jarquez Hunter, Keandre Lambert-Smith, that those guys could miss a bowl game, and they did. And so you cannot lower the floor and not be on fraud alert. So as you mentioned, to be on this list, there have to be at least some expectations on you. Like there's an expectation that you will do well. And I think there's some expectations from a lot of people that Auburn is a team that is ready to move to the next level. At Media Days, I heard a range of opinions. And I'm telling you, there were people who had them both on their potential dark horse list and on their fraud list in the same sentence, Chris. And I get that. I understand that. That's how wide the difference is between the floor and the ceiling right now for Auburn.
I agree 100%, Mike, everything you said. I mean, I think, again, people have to realize when you're talking fraud watch and why would you put a team on fraud alert? These are teams that should have high expectations and the where they finish may or may not meet their talent level and like how good they should be. So, I mean, to your point, you have to have Auburn on this. You just have to, because we've seen it under Hugh Freeze that Auburn should have been better than they were. Should have had at least a couple more wins, and for whatever reason has fallen short. So, yeah, I mean, they absolutely have to be on here. It's a prove-it year for Hugh Freeze. I mean, I don't know, not to talk about like his hot seat or his job security, but what it would take if, how far south it'd have to go. But it's a prove-it year. With the roster you've assembled, with the investment that Auburn has made, its fan base has made, you got to get it done. So, yeah, I think they are the definition. Auburn is the definition of, like, when we talk about what makes a team or puts a team on fraud watch, it's what Auburn's done the last 2 years, right? It is, your talent level's here, but your production's down here, right? Your results are down here. So I think that's what does it. Will Auburn's production and results finally meet and catch up to where its talent is and where it should be? That's the big question.
Yeah, so. TBD. Yep. Great talk, my friend, as always. Those are your fraud alerts. We'll keep an eye on this during the season. We know we're going to have to follow up with everybody we put on fraud alert and then talk about where they actually finish, how they did during the season. Chris, I want to thank you for joining me today. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, Mike, you're the man. I appreciate you. I'm really glad to be doing this with you again. Yeah, we're at SEC Unfiltered. X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your content. You can also find us via podcast, YouTube, and, of course, our website, secunfiltered.com.
Guys, that's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. Do us a favor, if you're in the comments after this video and you want to show us some love, smash that super thanks button. We appreciate everyone for helping support us financially. We're on the road for SEC Media Days. Your financial support makes that possible. Please hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, for you.